Hey my friends, Kirby here of KirbyAndersen.com. If you're married, I know that you have most likely experienced the crazy cycle. That's what Emerson Eggerichs refers to it as in his book called Love and Respect. And you know exactly what it is. Let's say that the husband comes in and he pops off with something to his wife that sounds unloving. She immediately turns around, retaliates, zings him with something that sounds disrespectful. Or maybe she starts it. It doesn't really matter. This thing is going to go downhill really, really fast. And that's why I want to talk with you today about how to avoid or quickly diffuse arguments in marriage. 3 simple tactics to resolve differences constructively. You know, some of these arguments just catch us by surprise, and then there's other arguments that, man, we can see this coming a mile away. They are so predictable because it is something that has had some bad history, and unless we are going to approach it differently, we're going to have trouble again. You know, it's one thing to have a horrible argument, but it's worse to have it a second time. And I want to tell you something. I hate to admit this, but Gail and I have done that way too many times. But there's been a little verse in a New Testament book of James chapter 1:19, that has really helped us a lot over the years. It simply says, "Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." Now, if you're not all that familiar with the Bible at all, you'll find the book of James located towards the tail end of the New Testament, and you'd think that that was maybe one of the latter books to be written. But actually, chronologically, it was the first book to have been written to the early Christians. And it was meant to be this kind of crash course on just basics for living the Christian life. And what we find here in this simple little verse right here are some fundamental principles in just getting along with other people. And it will work tremendously in keeping harmony in your marriage as well. So let me talk here just a few tactics that are going to help you if you get into a potential hot spot again with your spouse and be able to deal with it differently this time, more constructively. Let's start off with the quick to hear part of this strategy. It means you got to listen to what's really being said. Be quick to hear what the other person is saying. Really try and genuinely understand them. You know, Stephen Covey wrote about this in his classic book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of those habits was seek to understand rather than be understood. Now, we like to be understood, and that's an important part of the equation, but you know what most of us do. We generally try and up front spend most of our time trying to be understood, and we're arguing. We need to flip this thing around. We need to start by trying to understand what's really bugging our spouse. What's underneath this comment here? What are they troubled about? What are they concerned about? What have they been hurt by? What are they fearful of? This is going to make a huge difference. And then we need to be slow to speak. And we start off by repeating back whatever it is you think your spouse just said. So instead of just firing back something based on what you think that they're saying, it's a whole better strategy to come back and say something like this. Okay, so if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is, and then tell them what you think that they're actually saying. And keep repeating that until they confirm that you've got it. You want to hear a yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what's bothering me. Next of all, ask more questions. Go beyond that. Instead of just starting in right away and arguing your point, man, try and gain even more clarity. And if this is an issue that is emotionally charged or again has some history to it, ask your spouse to describe this the best that they can. Just what exactly it is that they're feeling. Can they give you an example? Some kind of word picture. Because we need to understand what they're feeling. And then you need to choose your words and your tone wisely. And this is actually the slow part in speaking here. Take a moment to consider what you're about to say and how that's going to impact your spouse. And as far as being slow to anger, it means don't see your spouse as the enemy. That's immediately what happens when somebody says something hurtful to us or just pops off without thinking about it. But even if your spouse is lashing out at you in anger or frustration or they're hurting in some way, don't take it personally. And I know that can be tough, but try and have a little bit of compassion on your spouse. Because you know as well as I do that so much of the time the problem is not really the problem. Hurting people tend to hurt other people, and so if they're acting in a way that just doesn't really seem to be like them, there's something really bugging them on the inside. They're just not able to connect with that in a healthy way. And so help them out as you would want them to help you. See this as an opportunity for you to be able to relieve their frustration, their hurt a little bit, instead of just making the matter worse with all of your rash words. And then keep looking for the mutual win. This is just so important because most destructive arguments are very one-sided. They're either or. It's about one person trying to fight for his or her own one-sided victory. And that's not the goal here. The goal here is to form a win-win. You want both sides to win. Identify those non-negotiables, but man, be willing to flex everywhere else that you can. And for the argument that really kind of catches you by surprise, it's probably good for you to start with that slow to speak tactic or strategy first. I mean, man, there are so many times when you feel yourself just wanting to blurt something out. If you got to actually take your hand and cover your mouth, do it. I mean, if it takes duct tape your mouth. Push pause on this thing and agree that we're going to revisit it later when we're just a little more calm, and then start off with being quick to hear. Quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. I want to tell you something. That is a really great affirmation that you ought to include as part of your self-talk each and every morning. I am quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. And if you've got some unresolved disagreement in your marriage right now, I want to suggest to you that you talk with your spouse about what you're hearing here right now and propose that you take another stab at that. That you use a different approach. That you employ some of these tactics right now and try and go back, undo that hurt, and move forward in a constructive way. And it always helps to start off that kind of conversation with a kiss. Maybe just a simple, I love you, I want you to know I believe in you, I got the best interests at heart for you. Reach across the table, hold their hands, and begin a healthy, constructive conversation. I hope that's been very helpful to you today. This stuff has really helped us a great deal, and I referenced a couple of resources here in the last few moments. If you just look in the notes down below this video, you'll find links to all of those things. If this video was a good one for you and you want to stay up to date with future videos, make sure you go over to my website at KirbyAndersen.com and that you subscribe to my email newsletter. I hope you make this a great week. Live better, love more, leave the legacy that you truly desire. Stay on target, my friends.